Apparently I was wrong. We didn't even get through the one reference I wanted to get through. Because I wanted to also go back to chapter 1 of 1 Peter, which we will next time, because I think it's important. Okay, so this is what we call the afterburn, the time after the teaching. So if you have comments or questions, Steve will come around with the mic. If you're on live stream, Kurt and Rob will take care of that. And so simply raise your hand if you're here. I hope we're starting to get it little bit by little bit. You know, there's a school of thought that somehow the New Testament has made things easier. I don't see as much in the Tanakh dealing with your psychological and emotional struggles. How is that easier? Excuse me. You know, Paul, Peter, John, James, they're all dealing with the real struggle. What is going on in your head and your heart? Much more of this is discussed there than it is anywhere in the Tanakh. And in the Tanakh, where it is talked about, it's much more maybe hinted at it stuff. I mean, they're just right in your face. You do it because you love it, you lust after it, you need to stop it and just, you know what? Start over like a newborn babe. Okay, who wants to go first? Okay, Michael.
You might have already touched on it, but could you elaborate a little more on what spiritual slaughter is?
Well, it's not spiritual slaughter. It's basically pointing out that you're making an offering. In other words, he doesn't desire just the physical slaughterings that were going on in the temple. Okay? He's looking for you to make sacrifice. Remember, the sacrifices were called sacrifices because you were giving up something that you valued. And you were putting it on the altar. I mean, you had to put a bull on the altar. That was expensive. You talk about, people think, well, I give tithes and everything and then offerings too. And then you think about putting an offering of $5, $10. What do you think a lamb was worth? Okay, a lot. A bull, forget it. Okay? These things were valuable, expensive things. And so he's saying, look, I want you to make slaughter offerings that are well-pleasing in my sight. And if you're going to make those slaughter offerings, when he talks about, in verse 5, to offer up spiritual slaughter offerings. In other words, to offer up spiritual versions of what you're willing to give up that's valuable to you. You value it, but see, even when they gave the physical offerings, they didn't appreciate that. Wait a minute. The value in it is not because it's expensive, it's because, I need it, I use it for some reason, but I have to trust that he can replace it, give me more, that it's going to be good. Giving up something is going to bring blessing. Okay? But it's also when he says slaughter offerings, he says, look, the slaughter offerings you do is because I've instructed you and told you what to do. By the same token, the spiritual slaughter offerings are doing what he told you to do. Okay? Does that help? Okay, good. Next.
I was just wanting to make a comment or a question, kind of. You had on testing the kidneys. That's the same thing, the old saying that Abba knows how full of...
Yep. Well, no, not even that. No, we're not. I mean, look, testing the kidneys, it means that he gets right down to what's really going on. You know? In other words, when people say, I've learned to trust my gut, where you feel like you're thinking about doing A, but something inside just says no. And then you say you've learned over time to trust that, we call it a gut feeling, all right? Because that's kind of really how you feel about something. You think you want to do it, but in your, no. He goes down and tests you down to where you really are on things. That's what it means. Okay, Deirdre.
So just a couple little quick thoughts that I had. The whole idea of, the newborn babe, kind of struck me for obvious reasons. And just the thought of, the baby starts out in darkness.
They do start in darkness and they come into light, and that light is marvelous, And that's why they spend most of their beginnings marveling.
Yeah.
at everything. I mean, the look on their face when they're looking at stuff, even when they first see their own hand, and they're like, what's that? Wow, I can control that. I mean, everything is like, wow.
Yes. I feel like, that should be us in coming into this new light, just the marveling of
Right.
just everything that we're learning. We should just all just be going, oh my goodness, just all the time.
Absolutely.
And then for the second thought, you mentioned, you have the choice to, listen and do, what is instructed, or go and do it, your own way, even if it blows up in your face, as long as you're the one who did it correctly, exactly as it was, mentioned, you still did the right thing. It's still good. There's no shame attached to it. I immediately thought of Moses for both examples. When he goes into Pharaoh the first time, and he, nothing good happened. In fact, the situation got worse. And he just went back to Yahweh, and he's like, I did what you told me to do. I did it. It got worse. I don't know what happened.
So even though Moses felt some of the ramifications of it, like when he went and then Pharaoh says, well, go ahead and make brick without straw and all that stuff. But ultimately, whose problem was it? The one who gave him the instruction. So Yahweh, it was his problem. Yahweh handled it. See, if I send you to do something, tell you exactly how to do it, and it doesn't work or it breaks or something bad happens, I have to own most of that, okay? Provided in discussing it with you, we find out that you actually did what I said. Because sometimes people think they do what someone tells them, and then they come to realize, oh, I didn't do it exactly, and that's why it went bad. But the thing is, Yahweh owned it. Yahweh handled it. Yahweh took care of it. Because after all, Moses did exactly what he said. Okay? Go ahead.
And then you take that, versus, they're in the wilderness. Moses has had it up to here with these people, and Yahweh says, go speak to the rock. And Moses, I don't know if it was a conscious decision or if he just got, so overwhelmed with his emotion, but something inside of him said, oh, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do it my way. And he ultimately had to pay the price for that. He had to get the punishment, even though he did get forgiven.
Yeah. And see, and again, he gets the punishment because he didn't listen. But if you notice, Yahweh didn't punish the people because
Right.
Moses didn't listen. The water still came out of the rock. All right? So Yahweh's still sovereign and in charge. And that's one of the things that if you're under authority, you got to recognize that person still has a certain sovereignty and authority over whatever it is they're in charge of, and ultimately their responsibility falls on them. And so, people have said to me something, well, my supervisor tells me this, and I know it. Listen, sometimes you're going to have to do what they tell you to do, and if it goes bad, it ultimately will fall on them. It may fall on you as they try to pass the buck and everything else, but remember, you got a creator that's watching out for you. And if you end up losing that job, it may be because he's trying to get you into a different one. So don't over-worry about it, don't overthink about it. Just try to do the best you can. If you don't know how to handle something, do like many of the people here, well, not many, a few of them do, which is call and ask, hey, I'm in this sort of quandary with the authority at my job, I don't know what to do. And a few of you who do that, who've done that, have gotten good fruit because you've gotten the counsel on how to handle that correctly, okay? It's not easy to deal with authority because, especially if you're in a multi-tiered structured authority, and so you're one layer up, your direct supervisor tells you A, but the 2 layers up says B. So who do you listen to? Well, your real responsibility is to the direct 1 layer up person because they actually have you work for them under the bigger one. And so it's hard, but you also know that the one is not doing it right. Ultimately, it'll play out, but it's a tough situation to be in. Now, hopefully when it comes to this stuff, everybody is in perfect vertical alignment. So you want to hopefully find a leader who is teaching you, and the leader's teaching you as Yeshua teaches, as a father. It has to be a good vertical alignment. Okay, so we don't have any problems. All right, who's next? Okay, Rabbi Tom?
Thank you. In Kepha 2, verses 6 through 8, it talks about the chief cornerstone. And is it proper or fair to compare that to Haggai chapter 2 and verse 15 and verse 18, where it talks about the foundation of the Hakel, stone laid upon stone?
Probably.
Yeah. which occurred, of course, during the Hanukkah season.
Right. I mean, it's specifically, referring to Psalm 118:22, but it's certainly referring to things. When you see something thematically connected, the idea of laying the cornerstone, and you talk about the cornerstone of the temple, it's the chief cornerstone. Remember, if you know anything about building, okay, everything is about getting the cornerstone right. And when you get the cornerstone right, everything builds based on the cornerstone. Okay, everything as far as how things are going to be laid, how things are going to be level, how things are going to be founded is based on the cornerstone. And in a lot of buildings, you will often find some sort of engraving or plaque or something on the cornerstone of a building, because that is what holds it all together. All right? So, but yes, the Haggai thing would probably be a good connection. Okay, who's next? Okay, Shira?
Thank you, Rabbi. I thought it might be helpful to somebody, just if I would be permitted to give a short testimony about how I was led to lay down the past and start as a newborn babe. This happened several years ago, and I sat with you, Rabbi, and we had 3 pages of stuff. On those pages, I was renouncing these things, and on those pages were actually covenants and declarations that I had made as a Christian, statements of faith that I had signed to get into Christian college, to become accepted as a Christian camp counselor, to be accepted as a Sunday school teacher, and on and on. And there were things that were part of my identity that moving in a publicly in a spirit that I thought was the powers of the age to come, and it wasn't. And things like that, just many, many habits and thought patterns. And it really helped me to sit down and really enumerate things that were part of my identity and just renounce them.
No, that's great. I mean, look, it's one of your most powerful tools available to you is, if you can do it honestly, is simply self-examination. Okay? But the problem is, can you be actually honest with yourself? Here's the problem. You will either ignore things that need to be paid attention to, or you'll overly pick on yourself and beat yourself up for things that probably don't need to be treated on that level. But if you can just do it in a unemotional, objective examination. Hey, this is there? Oh, okay. Oh my gosh, blah, blah, blah. No, don't get all emotional about it. Just say, oh, that's something I did, or something I need to look at, and something I might need to let down. Just in a very clinical way, examine yourself so that you can at least get that done without the emotional part, okay? And what you're trying to do is lay down everything that you can and look for things that are potential filters. Shira comes to me on a somewhat regular basis when she says, wow, I didn't realize I still had that in me. Whatever that was, some sort of filter from Christianity that she had no idea was still there, and then I'll teach something, she'd be like, oh, that exposed something that was there. And that's part of what the teaching should be doing, is helping you to see something that still is there. Think of it like cancer, okay? Cancer, if you don't get it all, it can eventually spread again, but it can hide, because a lot of times people have had either family members or themselves deal with cancer and then have something happen where they didn't get it all, but they thought they did, because it hid behind some part of part of your anatomy, either an organ or a bone or something, but it hid somewhere a little bit. A lot of the stuff that you need to get rid of is fairly well hidden. Sorry, that was those Illuminati things again. Okay, but some of that stuff is very well hidden. And so you have to be actively looking for those things. Specifically in the context of hypocrisies, deceit. Okay, those things. Deceit in terms of lying to yourself or wanting to believe something, even though somewhere down in we call it kishkas, that's in the Yiddish, your gut. Okay, that it's wrong, but you don't want to actually deal with that, so you're hiding from that. It's a deceit. Okay, we're not talking about you actively lying to others, you're lying to you. That's the problem here. All right, he's talking about this from a point of view that you have to have personally put aside the deceit and the hypocrisies that are in you, in your life. Look for those. Thank you.
Thank you. You really touched on something, part of my second point. And the second point is that I look at that confession, those renunciations, as I chose to be a newborn babe. But eventually, I was a toddler. And you know what they're like. And so, yeah, it was like the renunciation and the being born as a newborn babe and choosing that didn't exempt me from the growth process, but I think it did create an agreement between me and Yahweh, with you as my teacher and witness, to just saying, I want to know the truth, and I'm opening myself to you, Yahweh. And so over the years, you know, I've had to repent of some stuff as it came up, but just staying with it. And knowing, I look at that point of being willing to make the self-examination and really make the declaration that I wanted to start completely over again.
Amen. Awesome.
And that opened the door for the growth.
Awesome. You know, look, I like the additional idea of the toddler. So what's the problem with a toddler? A toddler gets excited about everything and has no idea what to use it for. They'll stick things in parts of their body they don't belong. Stuff goes in the ear, stuff goes in the nose, stuff goes in their mouth. It's not food. Or they'll take something and put something in it, like in the toilet or in the this or the that. They don't know what goes where, how things work, what they're used for properly. They just, hey, that looks like something that fits there and that goes there. They have no idea what they're doing. They're just running around, just shooting in all directions and just doing whatever comes to their head. Well, that's kind of like where we get spiritually to some degree. We don't understand what to do. You know, all of a sudden, we start to think we understand the Bible. That's our main thing, and we don't use it right, okay? But toddlers do all kinds of things. You go, wow, where did you come up with that? But whatever you think, oh, they'll never think of that. Oh, yes, they will. And 75 things you never thought of, okay? Because I know some friends that are in the medical profession saying, you have no idea what two people come in with their kids, what they've managed to stick in their ear or their nose or whatever it is that they've done. Or what they've swallowed and because they don't know. They don't know as toddlers. See, as newborns, there's not a lot they can do because they can't do it. They're immobile and they have no control of their motor skills. You do everything. And all of a sudden now they're walking and they've got hands and they've got eyes and they walk to the thing they see and they pick it up and they do what they shouldn't do with it. That's what we do. Good picture, good metaphor. Next. Okay, now we're looking for, the live stream. Where's the mic? Okay.
Well, we have an issue.
I know you guys have like a major conference going on over there.
Well, we had someone that's kind of hacked and take over the chat box right now with some unwanted comments, and we overwhelmed right now, so we shut off chat.
Okay. So we're just not going to be able to do the chat? Okay, so I apologize to you on live stream. This is what happens when you have people that are just emotionally not where they need to be.
Yeah, these were sexual in nature. Have nothing to do with what our walk in the least bit. Just
But I'm just saying, it's again, that's an emotional, okay, you know. There are people that just want to go around to just disturb people's peace and mess with people's stuff and are about destruction and not about building, okay? And that's sad and unfortunate. So I appreciate that you guys got that shut down and locked down. And so look, if there was anything critical that you had to say or had a question to ask, you can certainly contact us directly during the week. Apologize for not being able to cover it here, but that does happen. I think if you go back and listen to the teaching, whatever you're asking will be covered more than once. You can go get the children. Apparently we're not going to be doing much more. Sarah Beth went to get them. But you know, this is going to be, at some point, I'm trying to figure out what to teach next, okay? Because I'm almost done. When I keep saying that, I keep ending up talking longer about I don't have a lot of pieces left to go through, but you know, they're taking longer than I thought they would. But we're not that far necessarily from finishing this thing. I mean, I know exactly kind of where we're going. Just I'm going through it fairly slow. But at some point when we finish this, I've got something else to do. And I don't know what I'm going to do yet. But I thought it might be interesting. I haven't figured out how I'm going to format this. But I thought it would be interesting to deal with the psycho-emotional stuff that you see in Scripture, meaning let's start with Adam and Chava and see what they were dealing with and where their heads were at. Then we move on to the people and the flood, and then we move on to, and see what was going on in their heads and in their hearts. And then we go through some of the journeys to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, just to kind of see some of the things that were going on with the different people we meet in the journey and where they did well and where they didn't in dealing with their emotional and psychological challenges. What do you think? Would that be something that'd be interesting? Okay. So I'm not sure how in the world to put that together or how I would kind of figure out what verses to talk about, but I think that at some point I'd like to do that. I don't know if that'll come next. I'd have to have enough time to figure out. I don't want to read the whole stories of things, but the stories that you know about, and then point out how they handled specific things and how their emotional state and this stuff here in 1 Peter 2 affected their choices and their decisions, their cravings, their desires, their fears, their doubts, their trust or lack thereof, which authority they were submitting to, and see that actually play out in the people that you see in the stories. Does that make sense? And then so that you can see yourself in all of that. Because sometimes I know we hold those people in very high esteem, and we should, but you still need to realize that they were just like you. In so many ways, they were just like you. And struggle with the same stuff, And I'm trying to find a way to make sure I don't turn this into just a life coaching Sabbath. But that's almost what we need at this point. The halakha, I'm not teaching you a lot of mechanics here anymore. We're not doing teacher stuff. We're doing prophet stuff, like the stuff that has to do with you need to be doing this and stop doing that. But the problem that's really hurting you is you don't understand why you're not doing it and why you're doing the thing you shouldn't. And it really comes back down to the issues that are psychological and emotional: trust, fear, doubt, insecurities, self-worth issues, all that. And you see that play out in some of these people throughout the stories. And somehow we need to fix all that, or we're never going to get there. Because that's the derailment. How do you deal with all the hurt and pain that you've already been through? All of the trauma. I think everybody has PTSD from whatever they experienced in their life. I used to think PTSD was a military thing. No, it's a syndrome that has to do with trauma and having emotional trauma. And so then we trigger people's trauma. And that trauma doesn't have to be, that you were in some military zone and watching people around you get, killed and blown to pieces. It could happen in watching your family get blown to pieces emotionally in a house, or the abuses that we see all around, etc., can really cause a triggerable trauma. All right? And I'd like to be able to deal with that, but I also want to make sure that it's appropriate in a Sabbath setting and how that really works out, because I've taught all the mechanics. If you want to understand any mechanics, every piece of mechanic I think is already on tape, so to speak. We don't use tapes anymore, whatever. I've recorded every halakhic, mechanical thing that I can think of, I think, at this point. Now it's more about things like darkness and light. This is all about scripturally understanding your emotional place. The trust versus belief versus fear and doubt versus, all of that mess. So we're going to do more and more of that, hopefully. What was that? Stuff that causes you to need a feelings bag, okay? And you need a feelings bag because you've got feelings that you don't have control over, all right? And so I can promise you everything I struggle with is because there's stuff out there that can still trigger an auto response. Same for you. The stuff you struggle with most is because there are things out there that trigger an auto response. In other words, there's something out there that's still programmed in you that when something happens will start the play button. And then you don't have control anymore. And now you're enslaved to a trauma. And you can't have relationships make it in a successful way if that person can trigger, especially because they don't have the map to the minefield. Because none of us give that out when we get married or have relationships, because you don't even know where all the minds are sometimes. Things trigger and you had no idea. Sometimes you had no idea it was there. Oh, I thought I'd already dealt with that. Boom, next thing you know, it's full trigger. But we need to go get the minesweepers out and go get all those minds cleared up. That's a work. That's a big project right there. Amen? Okay, so I know that you've already noticed that a lot of the teachings are heading in that direction, but they're scripturally based, important. I mean, this book talks about all of the New Testament, especially writings, talk a lot about where you struggle in your heart and your head. Remember, Yeshua's talking to Jews mostly. Actually, Yeshua's talking to Jews only when he's talking in the four Gospels and telling them, look, it's not a mechanical problem. The reason you do the mechanics in a wrong way sometimes is because you have a psycho-emotional problem, a trust problem, a belief problem. Not because it's hard to do the mechanics. Well, nobody can really keep the Torah. Really what? What can't you do? I challenge you on that. Show me what Torah is so hard. Only because of the triggered emotional traumas and stuff and the insecurity and the trust. There's nothing physically hard to do. Okay? Equal weights, equal measures, not murdering. Well, sometimes it's hard not to do that. If you're married, some of you think look, I have to work every day not to kill my spouse. I get that. Not because of my own marriage. I just get that we struggle with things. Maybe it's with, a teenager, like, oh, I'm going to pull a muscle not killing that kid, okay? But why do we allow ourselves to have things that can get triggered where you can feel that terribly out of control negative, all right? It's an out of balance. I believe, maybe you won't agree with me, I believe that in the kingdom, human beings will have found their way to balance. Because Yeshua represents someone who is balanced, emotionally stable, psychologically sound, okay? I appreciate that. And believe me, I would applaud louder than all of you because I get the phone calls from the psychologically and emotionally unbalanced. And by the way, if you call me, I'm not picking on you. Everybody in this room is psychologically and emotionally to some degree unbalanced. So everybody that calls, yes, but usually they're calling because their life is so out of balance that they now no longer know how to handle something in it. Usually their marriage or their children or whatever, their health or finances. But those are your four major things that you can have balance with. Husbands and wives, children, finances, health. Those are your four big areas right there, okay? That get out of balance. We're going to be in a kingdom full of people that have found a sound mind. We're not given a spirit of fear, but the spirit of a sound mind. Although the problem is I don't run into very many of those on a daily basis, including me. We just don't have that. We have fractured, damaged, diminished in their function in terms of our minds. It needs to be healed. And it's not going to be healed by having some sort of a prayer meeting or something. Okay? You're going to have to deal with your stuff and own your stuff. Stop blaming everybody else. You know what? Stuff happened to you. Okay. But now it's your choice. Are you going to let it completely ruin your life forever? Or are you going to accept that it was awful, it shouldn't have happened, it was horrible that you had to go through it, but now I'm going to not empower it anymore. I'm not going to relive it over and over again because I leave that feeling thing out there for someone to trigger it anytime. It's like a tripwire you leave out there because you haven't taken that wire and removed it so that it's no longer triggerable. But some of you are like, that's like a spider web of tripwires surrounding you everywhere you go. Forget about feelings based, you got tripwires. And so anybody goes anywhere within any distance of you and starts interacting with you, trip. Okay, and even if it doesn't cause an explosion, it might cause an implosion. You tailspin right into a depression or into a triggering of whatever negative emotional place. So maybe you don't confront the person, but it causes you to descend into a pit of despair of some sort. We got to fix all that. Okay, that was my making up for the fact that the chat was down. Gave you a few extra things while we were waiting on the children. All right, so we got everybody now? Okay, excellent. Okay, I'm sorry, Steve, go ahead.
Just a comment on what you were just talking about. What you focus on gets bigger.
Yep. Okay, what you focus on gets bigger. But the other part of that is there's stuff that you're not even aware that you're focused on, because it's happening in those auto-running programs in the back of your head that have been buzzing around for so long, you're not even aware that they're running, okay? I mean, you have programs running that it's good that they're running in the background, like the one that reminds you to breathe, the one that makes your heart pump. These are programs running in the background, so to speak. But you've got psychological and emotional ones that are running in the background too. So he's right, but you know what? That's about the stuff that you are actually dwelling on actively. That's the bigger stuff that right now, but you got a lot of stuff underneath the surface just waiting to bubble up. And you know what? When you feel in a safe place, bring them up one at a time and let's surgically handle them. In other words, cut and remove what needs to be, repackage and seal off what needs to be sealed off. You need to cauterize some of this stuff, so to speak. Okay? So it's no longer triggerable. That was right, though. What you focus on, you tend to get more of. Okay? All right. That's who's next. You got me going back to who's next. All right. So we're going to close in prayer. And Richard.